Is a $12 million fine just the cost of doing business?
Boy.
Or is it a sign that when corporations get this big, they become, I don't know, almost immune to the usual government rules?
It's definitely the latter. At
Yeah.
least until the government stops just looking for a check and starts, forcing companies to actually dismantle the toxic business models that cause all the harm in the first place.
And that really is the story of Dollar General.
In a nutshell, yes.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a whole stack of source materials. We've got court filings, regulatory reports, even internal employee stories to really dissect the operational model of Dollar General.
And this is a retailer that, it now has more than 20,000 stores across the country.
20,000, and yet it's been formally labeled a severe violator
Yeah.
by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA.
Right. And our mission today is to understand the precise mechanics of how this corporate negligence works. Because when you analyze the sources, it's clear Dollar General's entire profit strategy is built on what they consistently call an ultra-lean operating style.
Ultra lean style.
And this whole cost-cutting approach, it systematically led to over $26 million in proposed safety violations just between 2017 and 2023.
And here is the core hook. This is the one number that, for me, tells the entire story of regulatory failure. The $12 million settlement they finally agreed to in July 2024.
Yeah,
It's equivalent to less than 30 minutes of the company's annual revenue.
less than 30 minutes.
Think about that for a second. The accumulated penalty for years of systemic, dangerous negligence costs them less time than it takes for you to get to work in the morning.
That is a staggering mismatch. A fine that is, it's utterly trivial compared to the scale of the company.
Yeah.
And that forced the government to realize that, the traditional penalties were just useless.
So our deep dive is going to show how the regulators had to basically abandon that whole penalty structure.
Exactly. They had to mandate radical systemic changes inside Dollar General itself, to its corporate accountability, its store operations, all just to finally force them to comply. We're looking at a huge case study in what happens when the hunt for lean, aggressive profit just completely overrides basic human safety.
Okay, let's unpack this. And let's start where the problems really begin, which is with the people. The sources all point to two huge systemic failures, both driven by that cost-cutting philosophy.
Right. You've got chronic, intentional understaffing and then this pervasive, resulting mess where they can't manage the flood of inventory.
So that intentional understaffing, that's really the engine of the whole system, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Dollar General's model thrives on maximizing sales per square foot, while at the same time just absolutely minimizing what they spend on labor. The documents reveal a culture of just relentless, exhausting pressure on the store teams.
Relentless is the perfect word. We're seeing store managers routinely working open to close shifts. We're talking 6 in the morning until 10 at night.
All because corporate dictates these severe limits on employee hours.
Right. And one note from a source really stood out to me. It said that management sometimes restricts hours so brutally that workers are just too busy ringing people up to even do mandatory things, like update the price changes across the store.
It's an unsustainable, intentional strategy. It basically guarantees burnout.
And that strain, it immediately becomes a physical risk, a legal liability.
Of course. For instance, you have this corporate policy that says there should be at least 2 staff members present, especially at closing time.
Right, for safety.
But employees all over the country consistently report being left alone for hours at night. This isn't just, breaking some internal rule. It creates a massive security risk for that one worker, a risk the model is intentionally creating, but just starving the schedule of hours.
And the outcome of all this is what you'd expect. An ongoing labor crisis. You see walkouts, disputes. The system is just pushing people to their absolute limit.
We saw it happen in Esperance, New York, just this year. 6 employees, they all walked out together.
And what were the reasons?
Things like stolen sick time and just outright missing paychecks.
Yeah.
These are all symptoms of an HR and payroll system that's completely overwhelmed and just failing.
But the incident in Mineral Point, Wisconsin, that one might be the best example of this conflict between the ultra-lean model and just basic human decency.
And the food donation story, yeah. 6 workers there quit together after getting reprimanded.
And what did they do wrong?
They donated over 7,500 pounds of expired food to their local community.
Wait, 7,500 pounds? The volume alone is incredible, but why would donating expired food be an offense, let alone one that's so serious it causes a mass walkout?
Because the company's rules are so rigid. They treat food waste purely as a liability. The policy says expired products have to be disposed of in this very specific controlled way to, mitigate any corporate liability and theft risk.
So when the workers donated the food, they broke that strict corporate procedure.
Exactly. And the irony, of course, is that the massive amount, 7,500 pounds, that just highlights the fundamental failure of their own inventory system,
Right. They were getting way more perishable food than they could ever sell or manage.
which forced these overwhelmed employees to choose between community good and some ridiculous corporate rule. It's a stunning example of prioritizing liability paperwork over just common sense.
So looking at this operational neglect, I have to ask the critical question the sources don't always hit head on. Is there any argument that this ultra lean model, as dangerous as it is some kind of necessary evil to keep prices low for the communities that really rely on Dollar General?
I mean, that is the essential trade-off, isn't it? But the evidence suggests the danger just far outweighs any supposed necessity.
So they're not just about low prices.
No. While they do operate on thin margins, the company's focus is on wealth extraction. The sources that describe the labor culture, they call the system a meat grinder.
The meat grinder.
Yeah. High employee turnover, that means constant hiring, constant retraining. That's a huge financial inefficiency.
Yeah.
And yet, the company chooses to absorb that cost rather than just increase staffing and wages,
So they accept the inefficiency on the labor side.
because they know they can always replace the worker. And that decision, which is based purely on maximizing profit, that translates directly to physical hazards in the stores.
That's a powerful connection to the neglect of the human element. It just inevitably shows up as physical neglect inside the stores.
Which leads us right to the next point, the literal life and death dangers that inspectors were finding.
The primary operational failure is something you can see in almost every store. Just
Hmm.
dangerous, pervasive clutter.
It is. Because the staff are chronically understaffed, and they're simultaneously being pressured to process these huge amounts of inventory, the stores quickly become, and this is a quote from inspectors, operational nightmares.
You've got overstocked, unshelved merchandise just spilling out of the back room onto the sales floor, blocking the aisles.
And this isn't just, a minor fire code violation. It is an imminent danger.
Okay, so give us the stats that really emphasize how severe these repeated violations from OSHA were.
Well, the violations are so consistent across the entire network, which tells you this is a structural failure, not just a series of accidents. We are talking about blocked emergency exits.
The most basic thing.
The most basic thing. Fire extinguishers that are completely hidden by stacks of boxes, inaccessible electrical panels. Inspectors classify these conditions as imminent danger.
And that's a category that's reserved for hazards that could cause immediate death or serious physical harm.
Exactly. When regulators use a term like imminent danger, they're signaling that the company has moved way past simple negligence and into actively endangering its own employees and its customers.
So the regulators stress that in an emergency, a fire, a collapse, whatever, the seconds lost trying to get to an exit or an extinguisher.
Can be the difference between life and death. When the only path out is blocked by boxes, or the tool you need to fight a fire is buried under inventory, the company is fundamentally gambling with human lives to save a few bucks on labor.
It just shows a profound corporate indifference to safety protocols.
Rules that have to be followed no matter what your staffing level is.
Let's pivot now to the question of accountability, the elephant in the room. Why did standard fines fail to change their behavior for so long?
Well, the simple truth is that for a corporation with revenue in the tens of billions, a multi-million-dollar fine is just an expected, easily absorbed cost. It's a nuisance, not a deterrent.
So let's put the timeline and the numbers together. Between 2017 and mid-2023, OSHA assessed over $26 million in proposed penalties.
Right.
Yet, the source materials show that as of July 2023, Dollar General had only paid about $4 million of the $21 million that had been formally assessed. How can a company just sit on $17 million in fines?
And that's where you see the corporate defense mechanism kick in. When OSHA issues a violation and a fine, big companies almost never just pay it right away.
They fight it.
They initiate a long, complex legal appeal process that can drag on for years. This strategic litigation, it dramatically slows down the whole enforcement process. It turns the fine from an urgent safety matter into a deferred liability on a balance sheet that they fully expect to negotiate down later.
So by only paying $4 million, they were basically signaling they'd legally fight the rest of it until the very end.
Exactly. And that strategic delay brings us right back to that $12 million settlement in 2024. Let's just reflect on the scale of that again. A $12 million fine. set against a massive $38.69 billion yearly revenue in 2023.
The numbers are just dizzying. To put that $38 billion into perspective, that's over $100 million in revenue every single day.
So when the source material tells us that the $12 million settlement is only 0.0003% of that annual revenue, it's a jaw-dropping calculation.
It literally cost the company less than 30 minutes of operation.
Less than 30 minutes.
That one statistic, it just crystallizes why critics are absolutely right to describe these fines as nothing more than a cheap license to operate, a cost of doing breakfast.
And their placement on OSHA's Severe Violator Enforcement Program in 2023 was the government officially recognizing this strategy. It confirmed the company's demonstrated indifference to safety.
They did the math.
It did the math. It was cheaper to budget for the eventual delayed and negotiated fine than it was to hire the staff and spend the money to actually stay compliant.
So it sounds like OSHA was powerless against this kind of corporate legal maneuvering. If all they could do was issue fines, the company could just absorb or delay?
They were certainly hampered, but not completely powerless. And this contrast in their enforcement power is really critical to understanding why the settlement finally happened.
So what changed?
While the fines were easily absorbed, OSHA holds the power of stop work authority. They can issue an imminent danger notice, which forces an immediate evacuation and a halt to operations in that part of the store until the hazard is completely resolved.
So stopping sales, halting the actual revenue stream, that's the real leverage.
Precisely. And for a pattern of noncompliance, OSHA can go even further and seek a court-ordered shutdown of operations.
A full shutdown.
A shutdown is the true financial stick because it hits the company where that ultra-lean model relies most: continuous high-volume cash flow. Halting sales even for a little while carries severe economic consequences and lasting reputational damage that far outweighs some delayed fine.
So when the multi-million-dollar penalties failed, the regulators used the threat of actually interfering with their operations as the basis for finally forcing a real settlement.
And that threat brings us directly to the mandated shift in corporate accountability, detailed in that July 2024 settlement. This is the moment regulators stopped just writing tickets and started forcing the company to dismantle the flawed business model itself.
This settlement really represents a radical pivot then.
It does. OSHA realized they couldn't just fine Dollar General for blocked exits anymore. They had to fix the overwhelming inventory problem that was creating the clutter in the first place. They went after the root cause.
So what kind of operational restrictions did the government actually force on the company's internal logistics and management?
Well, Dollar General was forced to fundamentally restructure how it loads, ships, and stocks its stores. Key requirements included significantly reducing the amount of in-store inventory.
So stop flooding the stores.
Exactly. And implementing mandatory improvements to stocking efficiency. They have to stop sending more product than the skeletal staff can possibly handle.
And the regulatory oversight is now deeply embedded within their management structure. It's not just an outside body anymore.
Absolutely. The agreement mandated huge structural changes to their corporate governance. They have to hire more safety managers, establish a worker safety and health committee that, and this is critical, must include actual employees to provide internal feedback.
And what about the external oversight?
That's the biggest change. Dollar General has to retain a third-party consultant to identify hazards and a separate third-party auditor to perform mandatory, unannounced annual safety audits. This external accountability ensures compliance is ongoing and verifiable, not just a promise they made in court.
And here's where the financial punishment finally gets sharp enough to be a real deterrent. The settlement introduced a new fine structure.
One that's designed to add up faster than their lawyers can appeal it.
Tell us about that.
This is the financial lever that matters. Dollar General now has to fix safety hazards within just 48 hours of being notified.
48 hours.
Or they face steep, immediate, and escalating fines of $100,000 per day of noncompliance.
$100,000 a day.
And those daily penalties can stack up to $500,000 per incident. This whole mechanism is designed to make immediate compliance financially mandatory. It just removes the profitability of delay.
It's fascinating, too, that we can already see the combined strain of all this regulatory costs, forced operational changes, and customer hardship starting to actually affect the business model itself.
The sources absolutely confirm this compounding effect. Regulatory costs are rising, their margins are tightening because of increased spending on labor and compliance, and customer spending habits are shifting.
Which all culminated in Dollar General announcing the closure of over 150 underperforming stores.
Right. That was $96 General and 45 of their pop shelf locations as their profits plunged, what was it, 32.3% in March of 2025. The cost of running an ultra-lean, negligent empire has clearly finally hit a tipping point.
So we've traced how Dollar General's commitment to this aggressive, ultra-lean business model became the direct cause of systemic safety failures and a labor crisis, forcing the government to impose structural changes and, these coercive financial penalties that were based on the threat of an operational shutdown.
This case really reveals a fundamental flaw in our conventional regulatory framework. If a corporation of this magnitude can treat multi-million-dollar signs as a trivial operating expense, something that costs less than a morning's revenue, it raises a really profound question.
Which is,
Are we approaching a point where the sheer scale of a corporation just inherently outstrips the capacity of our existing financial penalties? And must the government always resort to these threats of operational disruption just to ensure basic safety compliance?